You're listening to The Main Event with Zach Gelb and Mike Zahn on WHIP.
11:17 is the time here in the WHIP studios. Zach Gelb and Mike Zahn here with you. I had a real blast watching St. Joe's play basketball this year as they had a pretty good run that ended playing Oregon. And now joining us on the hotline is the head coach of the St. Joe's Hawks, and that is Phil Martelli. Coach, it's Zach and Mike. Thanks for coming on. Always fun to talk to you, and how are you?
I'm doing fine, fellas. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thank you for coming on. So when you take a look back at the season, had a few days to digest the tough loss to Oregon in the NCAA tournament, what are some things that stand out to you about the run your team went on, and what are some things you think they could improve on?
Well, it certainly was a group that was tremendous to deal with from August on. Just a great team. I'm not talking about basketball, but in terms of personality, coachability, enjoyment of what they were doing. Too many young people out there are walking around and heads down, eyes down, and really not enjoying their day-to-day pursuits. And we have to change that, and hopefully we can change it on the Temple campus, we can change it on the St. Joseph's campus, we can change it in Philadelphia, and then let it spread. The balance with which this team played, the balance in terms of how to practice and how to prepare and how to compete in the games was a joy. Obviously, the growth in Isaiah Miles from one year to the next is extraordinary and is to be emulated by all of our younger players. In terms of what we have to build on and grow, DeAndre Bembry has to make a decision based on what's best for his future and his family. And then every young player in our program has to get better. If DeAndre was to move on, with Isaiah moving on and Aaron Brown moving on, there are three leading scorers. And you have to be successful in this game, you have to score points. People could talk all they want about defense, but you have to score points, and we would have to do that. And we're going to start to do that in some light individual work going into the Easter break, and then next week continue to develop not just Atlantic 10 players, but Atlantic 10 champions.
When you take a look at Miles this year, and Temple knows what he could always do against a pretty darn competitive team in Temple, seeing what he did 2 years ago in a fun game that came down to the wire, just what buttons did you push with him to get the most out of him? Because he had a pretty special year, Coach.
Well, there's no question that it was a special year, and all credit goes to him. He and the assistant coaches, after we sat last year, and he told me what he would like to achieve, and he really wanted to be considered one of the better players in the Atlantic 10 and in the city of Philadelphia. And what he did is a credit to the way he was raised, and to, as I said to him yesterday in a team meeting, he came outside of himself. He was comfortable. He was comfortable in the classroom. He was comfortable on the court. He was comfortable in the weight room. And he could have remained comfortable and gotten through the year, and everybody said, he's a nice player. But what he did was he challenged himself, and he answered the challenge. And he can walk out of here head high that he is one of the better players in a remarkable city like Philadelphia. He's going to graduate in May, and he leaves an A-10 champion. It's a remarkable story.
And when you're the head coach, you have guys that come in here and you develop these close relationships with them, and you really get the most out of them, and you make them into men. That college part is really just such an integral part of their lives as we know it, and you build these relationships, and you have the turnover of a roster from year to year. And we've seen so many good games in this NCAA tournament and some collapses as well. Like you see a game like Northern Iowa, they're up 10 with 30 seconds to go, and they can't find a way to win that game. And there's so much pressure in these NCAA tournament games, and they come down to the final few possessions. Just what did you say, with all that being said, to your team after the loss up against Oregon?
Well, first and foremost, that it was no one's fault. If there was fault, it was mine. Excuse me. Maybe I didn't do enough to prepare them properly against Oregon's zone offense. Maybe use a timeout here or there. But at the end of the day, we walked into that building as a championship team, and we were going to walk out when they were all ready, and they had to do it together. They were going to walk out together as champions. The only other thing that I would add, similar to what Temple went through, is sometimes this game doesn't give you what you deserve. So, in my view, watching from across the country, Temple deserved to beat Iowa. But the game sometimes doesn't give it to you. And there are lessons to be learned in sticking together. There are lessons to be learned in facing the media in those situations. And at the end of the day, if this is the greatest disappointment that any of these young guys will have, then they're going to have a really special life.
We're talking to the St. Joe's Hawks men's basketball head coach and Phil Martelli. And coach, two of the three Big Five teams, they got to play in Brooklyn. One Big Five team, they played in Spokane, Washington. When you guys found out you had to go out to Washington, what did you think of the selection committee's decision to do that?
I had no reaction, nor did anybody on our travel party. Families. My only disappointment was the families that have been so close and love their sons and have been at every game. It was very restrictive who could get there as quickly as they had to get there. Basically buy a plane ticket, $1,500 in a 5-day window. That was my only disappointment. I believe that committee, they got it wrong with St. Bonaventure from the Atlantic 10. St. Bonaventure belonged in the field. But once they start with the numbers and the seating, I don't even pay any attention to it. And 2 years ago, we were fortunate enough to go to Buffalo. And we had a lot of people get to Buffalo. And this year, I'm sure there's all kinds of metrics and analytics that they come up with, and they sent us west. So, the one thing that was intriguing to us is that we knew we were the last game. We were the last game of the night, both Friday and Sunday. And everybody, even if they were exhausted, everybody that follows and loves college basketball would be watching. So that was a little bit of a special feeling.
And you mentioned already earlier how important DeAndre Bembry is to this program. And, he wins Big Five Player of the Year in a year that you can argue was one of the best in the Big Five, such a competitive year for the Big Five. Just how much did that honor mean to you as his coach, and what did the honor mean to him as the player?
He was visibly moved when I announced it. I announced it on our charter flight coming home on Monday. He was really moved. He's not about accolades. He's not about individual attention. He's about team and wins. And I explained to him last year, I thought he was the best player in Philadelphia last year. But rightfully so, the voters chose to honor Darren Hilliard from Villanova. It was a remarkable team, the best team with the best player. I get that. And I'm not saying that we were the best team, but certainly this was a special team, and he deserved to be honored. And he immediately will defer and give credit to his teammates and his coaches. That's just who he is and how he's been raised. But he's a special, special person above and beyond being a special player.
I know you were talking about it a little bit earlier in the interview, but Bembry now has this decision to either go pro and forgo his senior season or come back. It will be interesting to see what he does. But what advice do you give a player when he's in that situation, Coach?
To listen to the people that have been with you the longest. They can all choose to listen to, people from the internet who have message boards and blogs, and they could choose to listen to anonymous scouts. They could listen to agents or runners. What I ask all of them to do is to bring their circle tight, and in DeAndre's case, that would be his mother and his grandfather. Bring your circle tight and discuss it. And if you, I don't want to vote because I'll always be accused of being selfish and having my own motivations. But if you need me to gather information, I'll gather information and I'll present it to you. And I just ask that you make a rational decision and not an emotional decision.
Phil Martelli joins us right now on the hotline, WHIP Radio in Philadelphia. Let's get to the team that does remain in the Big Five, in the Big Dance, trying to get to the Elite Eight, and that's Villanova. They have a good matchup up against a really good coach in Jim Larrañaga. You played Nova this year. What are some things that stand out to you in this Nova-Miami matchup?
Well, Villanova's intangibles are absolutely positively off the chart. We all read about, because we're in Philadelphia, we read about the Villanova basketball. We play Villanova basketball, and you might scratch your head and say, I'm not sure what that means. But I get it. It's their intangibles. They don't worry about their lack of size. They find matchups. They're extraordinarily well coached. And sometimes we forget, like Jay Wright went to the Final Four too. So yes, Jim Larrañaga went to the Final Four, but Jay Wright's been to the Final Four. And he's gone there on the backs of remarkable people in his program who are extraordinarily well coached, and they're driven. So I think this game is going to be extraordinary because I do think that they're looking in a mirror. They're looking at themselves when they look at Miami. Miami has older guards. They have inside presence, and they play with a swagger. And Villanova dominated the Big East again this year. A couple of hiccups, but dominated the Big East. And Miami was to the last day of the season to win the ACC, and the ACC has 5 of 16 teams left.
You talk about people and Jay Wright and surrounding his program with the right people. And we had Seth Greenberg on the show from ESPN the other day, and he was talking about Fran Dunphy, and he said Fran Dunphy doesn't only have a PhD in basketball, but a PhD in people, and you surround yourself with pretty good people as well. And that just seems like the Big Five. Yes, you need talent, but sometimes they get the best out of players that aren't the most highly recruited. Just how important is that aspect? Because we've seen it here at Temple and through other programs, just surrounding yourself with the right people, not necessarily the best talent.
Well, I think it's much more important to have good people than it is to have good players. I think that good people can grow into being good players, and sometimes we see good players who don't get it. They have the ball in front of their character, and that's not what this is about. The only thing that I would change about what Seth said is Fran Dunphy doesn't have a PhD in people. He's way beyond that. He is an extraordinary person. And he's a guy, and you guys are young, so you might not grasp this, but if you filled a room with people around Fran Dunphy and said, everybody in here that thinks they're Fran Dunphy's best friend, raise your hand. And I tell you, the overwhelming majority, 90% of the people would raise their hand and think, well, I'm his best friend. That's a unique ability, because as you guys grow and get older, you're going to find out that friends can be limited to one hand. And if you're really fortunate in life, you're going to have a handful of friends. But Fran Dunphy has, because of his character and because of his care and concern, has friends from all walks of life. And to be associated with him, to be associated with Jay Wright, to be associated with John Giannini, Steve Donahue, Bruiser Flynn in Philadelphia is beyond my wildest imagination.
Well, Coach Dunphy and the Temple Owls, they didn't end up winning their conference tournament. You guys ended up winning your conference tournament, and it probably helped give you a spark in that 8-9 matchup. Just how important was winning that conference tournament to beat Cincinnati and then give a number 1 seed Oregon all that they could take in that game?
Well, to have champion put on your name, like going to the NCAA tournament is true joy. To go there as a champion, as we've done 2 of the last 3 years, is beyond that. And then to win a game is 4 times beyond that. Championships are for life, so our players will always have that. Winning an NCAA game will stay with them forever. And players being players, losing the NCAA game as we did against Oregon, that will pass, but they will always remember, that time that they spent together. And winning the conference championship, going to the NCAA tournament, you almost get into this time warp. You don't know if it's Tuesday or Wednesday. You don't know if it's Thursday at 5 or Friday at 1. You're just kind of moving and really keeping your eyes wide open and taking in every moment of it. It's really special, and I met with my team yesterday to kind of get them back into the quote unquote real world. Get to class, get to your tutoring sessions. Let's get you in the gym. Let's get in the weight room. And being real honest, it will be hard to watch the games, particularly the West Regional, because every dream that we had was to be in Anaheim at this point in time.
On the way out with Coach Martelli. And, Coach, you picked up an NCAA victory on Friday. It got you to the round of 32. That was your first tournament win since the 03-04 team that made an Elite Eight run. Just how important was that to get that monkey off your back?
Well, I never really saw it as a monkey. I get it. I know that fans see it that way, and we're measured by the results. And so to remove that, like we did this year, we were talked about as a team that didn't play well on the road. We removed that this year. We didn't win close games. We removed that this year. We competed for a regular season championship, but we didn't get there. So now we have that hanging over our head. And, the pressures or the outside influences and comments that come, they can be daunting, but at the end of the day, when you put your head on the pillow, you have to believe that you've done the very best you can with this particular team in this particular year.
Now, Coach, before we let you run, I actually had class this morning with a family member of yours here at Temple, your nephew, Jared Phillips, and he told me that you're an avid Eagles fan. Did you happen to see Chip Kelly's comments this morning, and what was your reaction to them?
I haven't seen anything this morning. I'm proud to announce to you guys that, and this is a major announcement for a bald man. I had to get a haircut this morning.
Wow. Well,
so I didn't have those five. I don't get those 5 minutes back that it takes. So I haven't seen anything Chip Kelly said, and my nephew's a really terrific young guy, and to promote me as a big Eagles fan is a little bit of an exaggeration, but I do enjoy all Philadelphia sports. I'm a much bigger Phillies fan than an Eagles fan, but I don't even think my own family knows that.
Wow, interesting. Well, Chip did say that when it came to talent and Colin Kaepernick, his new quarterback, that he doesn't cut talent. So I thought that was interesting, the way that he cut Deshaun Jackson. So, hey, whatever Chip's going to say, that's what we're going to roll with right now, although we didn't agree with it. But, Coach Martelli, thanks for a few minutes. We appreciate it.
I really appreciate your time and including me in the conversation today. Thank you.
No doubt about it. There is Coach Phil Martelli joining us on the hotline, WHIP Radio in Philadelphia. A lot of good stuff with the St. Joe's coach, and we get to bring that perspective because, hey, I was rooting for St. Joe's it was Sunday night. Yeah, and that was the last game that I watched, and it ended after midnight. And I was kind of crushed when they lost because I really wanted to see Bembry get to that next round and play Duke.
Yeah, it hurt. I mean, when you live in the city, I've been living in it for 4 years, you get wrapped up in basketball within the city, more so than any other sport. College basketball in the city, it is a very special thing. So great to have Coach Martelli on. He added a great perspective. And, I mean, these Philadelphia coaches, they are something else. You don't even need to look at the main three that were in the tournament. You just look across at the entire 5 head coaches that are still here, and you can look at these program histories. These are just some really spectacular guys and coaches.
And Coach Martelli's grandson, not Jared, because that's his nephew.
Yes.
But his grandson is always cute and sits there at the press conference, and he mocks the way that his grandfather Phil Martelli does things. Wears the suit behind the bench. I wonder if a young Jared Phillips ever sat in on a St. Joe's press conference and mocked Coach Martelli.
He's not as cute, so maybe that's why.
All right, 215-204-WHIP is the number. Time in the WHIP studios is 11:36. We got to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with Tom Anslin for a WHIP sports update and Flyers talk to come.